When a child dies, the greatest tragedy is the loss of what could have, should have, and might have been. Since we know that to be indisputable, we must then appreciate Margie's life as one lived to the fullest. In addition to her more than 50 years of love and devotion to her husband Harry, she bestowed her faith, grace, and generosity on her 4 children, 8 grandchildren, and countless others. I include myself among the others. In 1982, during the spring of my senior year in college in California, my mother contacted my Aunt Margie about the possibility of my spending a summer in Packanack Lake so that I might get a job in advertising in New York. I was concerned that it was a lot to ask, but I was relieved to soon learn that Marge and Harry were not only amenable to the idea, but that they'd be delighted to have me. I always loved Aunt Margie, and that summer was a treat for me, as I had the pleasure of living with and getting to know a woman whose energy, grace, and generosity knew no boundaries. In addition to being one of the most capable women I'd ever met, she'd whip out the New York Times crossword puzzle on Sundays in minutes, while throwing together an amazing meal, setting up bridge games, tennis games, evening cocktail parties, church functions, and helping me navigate my excursions into New York, and generally being a rock for me all summer long. Not only that, she was just plain fun. On my 21st birthday, she took me to see the Duke Ellington story Satin Doll on Broadway. She took me to see Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. When I needed a wardrobe for my new job at Gray Advertising, she took me to all of her bargain designer dress shops, and I remember leaving with practically a rack of clothing and boxes of shoes for what most women would have spent on a good suit. Nearly every evening when I returned from work, Margie and I would have a glass of white wine on ice, or 2, and share colorful stories from our day. Her can-do spirit permeated my entire existence, and she was always full of praise for me. If I'd had some kind of a mishap or disaster ever in my life, I knew that I could tell her about it because her response would be, "Oh, Chris." And before she'd get down to helping me fix things, she'd lighten the weight of my burden with a warm laugh. Then her eyes would cast off to 2 o'clock, and she'd come right back with some words of wisdom that would put everything into perspective. When I think of Aunt Margie, above all, she was efficient to the extreme, but in the best possible way. Margie was no fuss. She never spent time sitting around worrying about what might be or could be. She made things happen for herself and for everyone. I learned from Margie that you have to be the difference you want to see in the world, and God helps those who help themselves and others. Rather than mourn my Aunt Margie's sudden death as a tragedy, instead I remind myself of the fragility of life and the fact that none of us knows when our last day will be, so that I too, like Margie, will make every day count. I can only hope that, like Margie, I should be able to leave my life with friends and family who found my presence to be one of joy, indomitable spirit, and most of all the sense of fun that she always had. The world was certainly a better place with Margie in it, but her spirit will always linger in our minds if we allow it to. To Margie.